Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Our talk is about choice and voice. It's about adding a little touch of personalized instruction to your classroom through the guise of student led discussions. When we think about the South Carolina competencies, these two come up. We're hoping to support these competencies through our classroom discussions. We're hoping students will engage in academic discussions with their peers and that they will monitor their own progress and adjust when necessary. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get ready for an academic discussion in your classroom, what to do during the discussion when it's happening, and then maybe what to do to reflect and assess after the discussion has taken place. These are activities that can get your students ready for the discussion. The best way to get your students comfortable is to get them thinking about the concept or the reading before the discussion takes place. A TQE is a fantastic way to do that. T stands for thought, Q stands for question, and E stands for epiphany. You can give students a little half sheet just like this, and they can fill it out based on the subject that they've been studying or the text that they've been reading. This happens to be an example from the novel of Mice and Men. Here's another example. This may be from a government or a history classroom. The student is studying the Bill of Rights. Once again, from the left, it starts thought. In the middle, there's the question. And on the right hand side is the epiphany. So, giving students just a simple assignment like this gets their brain juices flowing. They get to think about what they know. They need to think about what kind of questions they want to ask. And then when they sit down to have the academic discussion in your classroom, they're not starting from zero. They have a place to begin. The same is true of the next tactic. It's called a tiered questioning chart. On this simple worksheet, there's a schematic of a house and it has three levels, and you ask students to fill it out with their questions. Questions are a really powerful form of inquiry that gets them to think and develop a more nuanced relationship with the information. Simple recall questions that can be easily answered in a couple words of fact go at the bottom or the first tier or the basement of the house on the sheet. Questions that involve a little bit more analysis, they might have a more complex answer, go in the middle. And finally, at the top, the apply and expand questions are the questions that not only delve into the subject matter, but then ask what does that subject matter have to do with the student's life or the student's reality. So once again, this example is from English classrooms, and it's about of mice and men. The first question is, what kind of shoes does Curly's wife wear in the first scene? That question could be answered in just a couple words. But then if we move up to the second tier, what does this manner of dress say about her as a person, her as a character? We're starting to evaluate and analyze in a deeper fashion. And then finally, at the top, a student may ask, do readers judge Curly's wife based on her appearance? And is that so different from the kinds of things that people do today? Here's an example from either a science classroom or an environmental science classroom. A low tier basement question may be, what is coal ash? Can be simply answered in a couple words. A top tier question may be, is coal ash present in the waterways near my community? And what steps can I do to reduce any of my risks? So when you ask students, either through the TQE worksheet or the tiered questioning framework, to think about what they know, what they don't know, it gets them prepared to sit down at the table when the academic discussion begins. Now, let's discuss really quickly what we do when we're in the middle of the discussion. It's really important that you have some ground rules or some guidelines. Here's some on the left hand side of the screen that you might want to adopt. You might also consider having a non academic conversation where you set up those guidelines and ground rules and establish your expectations before you get to a content based discussion. On the right hand side, where it says let it go, you have to be ready for the reality that your first academic discussion, or indeed many discussions that take place in your classroom after that first one, aren't going to go exactly the way that you want. It's okay, but at this point during the discussion, we recommend not giving a whole lot of redirection or feedback except to enforce your guidelines and your ground rules. The next topic is a big one, which is how to track who speaks, how long each person speaks, the level of their participation. And this is where we want to recommend a tracking tool called Dialogic Live. It is an online platform, it's super easy to use. It's great to use on an iPad. On your iPad, you can assign students to particular seats. You can set certain criteria for what you want to look for in your discussion. Perhaps you want your students to ask certain types of questions, or you want your students to ask for clarification when they don't quite understand what a peer is saying. You can track which criteria your students use when they're in the middle of the discussion. You can make some quick notes and comments as the discussion happens. And then after the discussion, you can use this digital format to go back and see how the discussion went. In this illustration, you can see a quick mock-up of what it looks like to set up your students in the platform. After you get students sat, all you have to do is when the student starts speaking is hit the little bar under their name, and it automatically documents how long they talk. And then you can document on your side what criteria that you are looking for from each student. It gives you real-time data of what your discussion looks like. These lines are going from person to person to person as you hit the different respondents in the conversation. And then when you're done and you need to look back at that discussion, it gives you this very detailed report. All right, so you got through your first academic discussion. Now it's time to ask your students both to reflect and to assess what they did. Often we ask students to briefly describe three of the top issues that were discussed either in their whole group or partial group discussion. But then we also ask students to write in a little bit more detail about some topic that changed their perspective or deepened their understanding. It's very important we get our students used to reflecting this way. And when they turn that reflection in, this is the part where we believe the academic feedback should come into play. If you use a discussion rubric, you can ask students to mark themselves and rate their own performance in the discussion. And between the reflection and the self assessment, that's when you can give them one or two pieces of actionable feedback. Perhaps you want to tell students, you did a really good job in the discussion, but you failed to consistently refer back to the text or refer to the evidence that proves the point that you were making in the discussion. Next time we discuss, could you work on that particular skill? Use the reflection and the self assessment as a platform for giving that feedback. Remember, actually, during the discussion, try just to enforce the ground rules. And after the discussion, after the reflection and the self assessment, that's when you give your feedback. Those are the things that we've been trying in our classroom. Maybe they'll work for you. Take a look at this QR code. It'll bring up a couple of things like the TQE sheets. It'll give you some more pointers about discussions, and it will also give you some access to the Dialogic Live platform. All right, y'all. Thanks for stopping by.